Welcome to PMTV. I'm John Hyde from publicsectorpm.com.
And I'm Bernardo Torrado from the Project Box. We're your hosts for PMTV, a program where we host a group discussions with prominent project managers within the industry.
Now today we have three very special guests, and I'd like to invite each of them to tell us who they are, where they're from, and what particular interests, special interests they have in the world of project management. So first of all, could I ask Jose to introduce yourself?
Well, thank you. Good morning, and I hope that you are hearing me all right. My name is Jose. I'm from Portugal. I'm the PMI Portugal chapter president, and I'm also working on a consulting, training, and research company that works on the field of project, program, and portfolio management. My special thing is OPM3. That's a model to evaluate organizations.
Thank you. And Jonathan?
Hi, my name is Jonathan McCoy. I work for Siemens Healthcare in Norway. I'm manager of the project management office in Siemens Healthcare in Norway. My special interest in project management is within the healthcare area. We manage projects for hospitals here all over Norway.
Great. Thank you, Jonathan. And Dale?
Hi, I'm Dale Richards. I work for Rosetta Stone. I'm based in Virginia, in the Shenandoah Valley. It's a beautiful place. I work here in a PMO of about 8 project managers, and my special interest is survival.
Great. Wow. And how about you, Bernardo? A quick reminder of what you're about?
So I am the CEO of the Project Box. We focus primarily within human performance, particularly in project management and sales and social media. Our expertise is around industrial psychology, looking at group dynamics, but more importantly, understanding how to be able to maximize performance and increase project success.
Excellent. And I work in the public sector, and I suppose my interest is just trying to get things done in a pragmatic way. Right, great. Welcome, everybody. Bernardo, you're going to tell us what today's topic's all about.
Yeah, the topic of today is what is organizational project management and why does it matter?
Fantastic. Okay, so I think probably a good place to start. I must admit, when I heard the term organizational project management, I didn't actually recognize it. So maybe if we hand over to Jose first of all. Jose, could you give us an idea of what organizational project management means, that term?
Well, sure, thank you. Well, organizational project management is the way that you manage portfolios, you manage programs, and you manage projects inside the organization. So in OPM, we look for the strategical achievements that the organization wants to go after, and we try to organize the project, program, and portfolio management in such a way that that will be reached. This is not the formal definition that you may find in several different documents, a more formalized definition, but I think it's what it is.
Great. Okay. And so basically it seems selecting the right kind of projects is at the heart of organizational project management, so or at least it's a factor of it. So how would you, Jose, say that what are the things that influence the selection of projects within an organization? How do organizations choose which projects to run? Could you give us some insight?
Well, in my opinion, organizations choose projects according to the way that they want to achieve their strategical objectives. And, well, we may be talking about several different strategic objectives. For instance, one objective may be to have a better quality products, or another objective may be to deliver on time. And so if the project that you are really doing are going after the strategical objectives, then you have the right outfit to have good OPM. The way you choose these projects, the way the organization choose their projects, it should be in such a way that you actually go after the things that the organization want to be in the future. That's the conceptual part of it.
Okay, Jonathan, I was wondering if within the organisations that you've worked in, or other observations of colleagues, have you noticed any other factors which might influence how projects get into the pipeline and so on?
Yeah, as Jose said here, the project should be linked to a company strategy. They should support that, a balanced scorecard or some means of boiling down your company strategy to practical projects. So if that's in place, then the choice of projects then could be a number of factors. In my experience, there have been a number of projects, for example, looking at cost cutting, typically with IT project, looking for a way to improve performance internally, or they could be looking for a competitive advantage. I worked for an insurance company. They needed a project to get their insurance out on the internet. Customers could order on the internet. That's another, looking for an advantage. Yeah, where I work now, one of the very interesting sort of special areas in healthcare is patient safety, and they're always looking for projects to improve patient safety and patient outcomes. That's a vital part, and is a theme in all projects that we run now: patient safety, patient outcomes.
So, so there's possibly a regulatory angle to which will basically force an organisation to take on certain projects as well. Yeah.
That's another issue that you can get in, the authorities, politics, influencing which projects are chosen within the healthcare sector. That's another influence as well, regulatory.
Excellent. How about Dale? Did you want to chip in, Dale, with observations about how projects get into the pipeline?
Sure, absolutely. It's interesting to hear Jonathan speak to how projects are, I want to say, categorized or qualified, to be in the portfolio. At Rosetta Stone, Rosetta Stone is different from Siemens. We're not really in the healthcare industry, and so since we are mostly on technology and education, we have different regulatory issues with which we need to comply. So we have some more high-level categories that we use that are maybe different from others. One is compliance, because we do have certain areas where we do need to be compliant with various regulations. We have another area of revenue generation. That's another main category for qualifying projects to be in our portfolio. We also have kind of a foundational category for those projects that will help us to strengthen our infrastructure, our systems. And so kind of looking at how projects get into the portfolio, usually the Rosetta Stone portfolio has kind of these 3 or 4 main inroads that I just mentioned.
Great. What about your world, Bernardo? How do projects get on the table in finance?
Well, I think that there are a few factors that are taken into consideration. One that's been already mentioned is regulatory or compliance-driven projects. And in that particular category, I found that people try to broom in or brush in other requirements and other projects in the guise of compliance and regulation just to get some projects in there that probably would not normally get funding. So that's the one area. The other one is on a political standpoint. So what I found is that depending on the senior leader, they may push for certain projects that are, I guess, a way of them to leave a legacy behind. It may not always be right from a strategic standpoint. So I found either regulatory or from a political standpoint. And then the last one I would say has to do more from a grassroots approach where everyone kind of throws in the projects and then they have to go through the vetting process to assess which one of these projects they want to work on. So it really varies on the maturity level of an organization as to which projects are they going to work on, what portfolio of work, and this is an opportune time to talk about it because it's around this timeline that most companies are starting to figure out what does 2013 look like. So they are going through this particular process right now.
You know that theoretically, political or legislative things that alter the priority of the projects, they have to be taken into account. There is no other way of doing it. But if you go to the choosing models, you will find that most of the projects should be chosen according to the return over the investment model, and which most of the times is actually not used, as far as my experience can tell.
Interesting. Okay, so I think that leads us nicely into the second question, Bernardo.
Yeah, so I guess let me start off with you, Dale. Why we just kind of started hinting about the different ways that organizations prioritize their projects, but why do you think some of the organizations make poor choices in promoting the wrong projects?
Well, I think we have to remember that the projects support the strategy, and that the strategy needs to come first. And so when you have organizations where the strategy maybe is poorly defined or not defined, then it's kind of a free-for-all, right? Everyone is just throwing different projects into this funnel. They're trying to get their different projects approved and prioritized and funded. And it really takes a strong executive team to, first of all, have a strategy, to have an understandable and simple strategy, and then to identify the projects that will support it. I feel like Rosetta Stone's strategy is pretty clearly defined. I feel like we have a lot of executive, kind of hands on handlebars, if you will, to really guide that strategy. And every once in a while, you'll have maybe someone that will submit a project request, and you kind of listen to the business case for it, and you kind of get that feeling like something's fishy here. I don't know if this is really, I don't know if we've really done our due diligence relative to this specific project. And so I think really why some organizations make poor choices is because either the strategy is poorly defined, or because whoever it is that's trying to get that project onto the portfolio isn't really in line with that strategy.
That makes sense. What about you, Jonathan? What are your thoughts on this question?
Yeah, there's a number of areas really. Often, I think it can be, the sort of one way of defining the whole thing is saying that decisions are based on wrong information or beliefs. There can be a poor, just leading on from what Dale said, poor company culture for openness and listening. You can have the strategy in place, but you're not willing, the board or whoever makes the decision, is not willing to listen to internally to what projects should really be running. The decision makers may be out of touch with the market or out of touch with their employees, and poor choices are sometimes made as well. They're underestimation of technical difficulties or rather optimistic ideas about cost benefits. I've also seen that. Yeah, we must have this, but it can't cost that much, but we'll keep going anyway, and it's a total disaster at the end of the day.
No, you're right, and I think that you as you were talking, I was just thinking back on the investment model. Some companies find investment, or they define investment as the manpower months that drive the actual project, whereas others look at manpower months as a standard cost across the business units, but instead look at the actual investment as to either the software or the contractors that they bring in. So I think there's also a fundamental difference as far as how companies define their investments and how do they define their return on investments. Jose, what are your thoughts on that when you're thinking about why poor choices are being made in raising some projects up there?
Well, I always think when we're talking about this subject, why we the companies do bad projects. I always think that we have to go after the right ones, and it's very easy to say it. It's very difficult to really do it. But I believe that most of the times we are talking about poor portfolio management. Poor portfolio management means that you are not choosing the right projects at the right moment, and you can have projects that will be great in a few years, and there are companies that go to innovate too quick. There are projects that are really not that good for delivering value to the organization, but they are being done because of political influence, like we were talking before. And so I always think about the right projects, the right moment. I always think about the way they are going to be managed, and to have a good and strong business case for the projects, and to have a good and strong project charter is really important, because it can make a difference. I know companies that have a proper study for requirements, for instance, in the project charter, and that means that they can choose more well, because they know better what are the consequences of the projects that they are going to do. And so for me, it's a question of going and improve the way that organizations manage their portfolio. Most of the times, portfolio management is something like business development. You go after only the commercial and the way that you sell what the company does, and that's not enough. You have to go further. And so most of that times that's my opinion.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I also think that many times projects, although we'd like to see them as multi-year projects, are truly just 12 months or the fiscal year of how you're measuring the success of projects. And I think as a result of that, sometimes it may have been intended for being a multi-year project to show X amount of benefit, but most companies aren't as disciplined as they need to track some of those benefits. Jonathan, what are your, John, what do you think of that?
To be honest, a big challenge I see is not just about which projects are getting accepted, but it's a lack of a structured approach to really assessing proposals for new projects. So what I'm often observing are too many projects running concurrently, too many projects just going straight through an approvals process, or even, like I say, perhaps the approval process for initiating projects not even being in place, and then people bypassing those processes where they are in place. So as Jose says, this organizational project management seems to, in a big part, to be about portfolio management, and yeah, I'm seeing weaknesses in the initiation of projects right at that upfront part of the life cycle, and it's not an easy thing to resolve, I don't think, especially in this climate where everybody's trying to save money and everybody's coming up with new ideas for new projects, which are imperative.
Well, actually, what I've seen is the other way around. I think that with the economic constraints, and I'm in Portugal, so we are being rescued and so on, people are becoming better at doing proper initiation for the projects. I've seen that, because money now is a much more looked after thing, and so I believe, and I've seen that that we are actually bringing better business cases for the projects. That is really happening. I've seen that in several different organizations that I work with. Sorry that I interrupted you, but I thought that is a strong point, because when resources are scarce, then you have to improve the way you apply those resources, and that's really happening as far as I'm seeing. It doesn't mean that there is more money. That's another point.
Can I add something to what Jose was saying, and especially while we're on the topics of both money and also, how some projects can be selected, or the wrong projects can be selected. I think one critical input into the selection is some kind of performance data based on the past. If you have selected projects in the past that have been successful, where are the data to back up that success? Or if they have been less than successful, where are the data to back up the lack of success? If an organization, if your portfolio manager and your executives come together and, projects A, B, and C are all on the docket to be discussed and possibly approved and funded, if executives can't look at it and say, oh, well, remember how we did this other project in the past that was more or less successful, or a total flop, if they don't have that kind of information, that kind of institutional memory, then how are they supposed to improve in their selection of the right projects to support their strategy? So I think having some kind of data, some kind of information based on the past to show the success of previous projects is critical to select the right projects. And we're talking about, money and, the monetary figures that show that success.
Yeah, I agree. I'm sorry. I was just going to say, I think you're absolutely right. I think knowledge management is something that most companies strive to adapt to, but may not be as disciplined as they need to be to make sure that they're capturing historical, failures and successes so that they can learn from it. And unfortunately, we find ourselves in situations where most of the PMs were laid off in the last few years that left with all that knowledge. So when they go back to look for future strategic type of initiatives, they can't look back because they never tracked it. I do think that we should be, as a discipline, a bit more disciplined in tracking our knowledge management. But yeah, I think that is something that is critical from a decision-making standpoint. I think, Jose, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was only going to add that that's not, it's really complicated to see and confirm the return over investment if we go to the theoretical models and confirm the return of the investment for a specific project. Because when the project gets into the organization and becomes operations, it's very difficult to see the real result of that project, because you don't have an alternative way of the organization without the project. And so the only thing that you can do is that confirming, for instance, that your sales have increased. But you don't know, it's hard to connect sales increase into the website that you develop and actually promotes better the products that you are selling. And so a study that PMI did a few years ago about the value of the project management, it's a very well-known study. It was made with 60 top-level organizations. And there aren't any of the 60 top organizations involved in that study, could really tell how much was the return over the investment in a few years after the development of the project. Because it's not only what happens the next morning that the project is operating, is what is going to happen in 2 or 3 or 4 years, and that's much more complicated, as we all know, and it's very difficult. So we have to proceed on doing lessons learned and try to involve the lessons learned for the new projects without actually being able to confirm what happened in the previous ones. I know that this is kind of a disruptive affirmation for knowledge management, but it's not easy, believe me.
I agree. I'd say that that probably falls more from an IT standpoint. When you're looking at re-engineering like Six Sigma, they have to tie it into the P&L from a re-engineering standpoint. Yeah. They have to be able to show a direct correlation as far as the return on investment. So I do agree when it comes to more of the supportive type of enhancement or development, it's harder to tie direct results to that. But when we're talking about other disciplines like a Six Sigma, they have to show it, otherwise they're not efficient.
Yeah, but okay.
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say that in Norway we've abandoned lessons learned. We call them lessons relearned.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's a great way of saying it. It is.
Okay. That's basically what we've done so far is we've covered obviously organizational project management, the definition, why does it matter? It's about linking, taking business strategy and translating that into a relevant and achievable portfolio of projects. I wonder if we could turn to, well, we've started off by saying, how do organizations get this wrong? Perhaps we could just turn towards what are the signs of organizations getting it right. So what sort of good practice have you seen with organizations getting the portfolio management side of this thing right? So Jonathan, have you seen anything positive in your exposure to these practices?
Yeah, I have. Again, back to where I worked in the banking and insurance sector, where the top management, the board, were really interested in what projects were going on, and took a real interest and had there was real management ownership of the project, and also a culture where you have an openness, discussions internally on all levels about what projects we're going to do and how we're going to run them. If the top management are listening and willing to discuss that and make decisions based on that I think has been a very healthy project organisation, and also an organisation that's willing to understand and accept risks going forward and have routines in place to deal with risks. They really understand what they're getting into and what risks are out there. Again, getting away from this over-optimistic type of project management, which I've seen, especially, I'm afraid, in the healthcare system here, over-optimism, where the top management aren't really interested in the risks, and they're only interested in, well, how much money and the deadline, and they haven't really heard the people talking about the risks. They've just ignored it. So, yeah, openness and top management involvement.
So essentially, the culture of the organisation then clearly has a huge impact upon, the approach to authorising and initiating projects. Okay, Dale, did you have any? Have you seen anything that you'd like to share about organisations getting this right?
Yeah, the word partnership comes to mind on multiple fronts. Partnership between the project and portfolio managers and the executive sponsors. Recently, I was in a portfolio meeting where I had a business case that I had been working on with the business, and the executive sponsor for that part of the business was there, and she and I really, we had worked together to prepare this information, with her team, and presented it to the rest of the executives, and it really felt like there was a strong partnership there. So I would say partnership with the business. I also want to add partnership with finance, and this kind of goes back to our earlier conversation about money and the difficulty sometimes of quantifying, a project success. But like where you, for those projects or those types of projects where you can do some kind of financial analysis to project, okay, this project is expected to yield this kind of a return, or it's going to cost this much, and then you can kind of gauge the qualitative and the quantitative, yield of that project. So having that partnership with finance, so that when you come to the portfolio meeting, you've got some numbers to back up the business case for the selection of that project. So I would say partnership with the business and partnership with finance. If you can form that relationship within your organization, I think those are two really, really key success factors.
Yeah, so it's back to the kind of cornerstones of project management, really, I guess, with sort of collaboration and communication, and making sure that you've really engaged with all the key stakeholders as you're forming up the project. Okay, how about Jose?
Well, I agree with both of my panel colleagues, but I think that most of the time what I've seen is that when we have strong organizational processes that are well disseminated inside the organization, and at the same time you have good people to proper follow those processes, and if those are oriented towards what the organization wants to be in the future, and if you have technology and good technology support for managing projects and programs and organizing your portfolio, then you have usually you have healthy organizations for projects. I think that to have strong back office support, like human resources, like marketing, like finances, and to know how the projects interact with those areas is also very important. So yes, I think I agree with everything that my colleagues have been talking. Yeah.
Great. Bernardo, I'm conscious we're running out of time. Do you want to lead us into the last part of the discussion?
Definitely. So, one of the things that I'd be curious to know is how can organizations improve their approach to organizational project management? We kind of talked about, the good parts of Apple, but what tips can you provide that you've experienced that people can walk away with to say, you know what, I can probably apply this in my organization. So, Jonathan, do you want to kick it off?
Well, yeah, we've said a lot of there's a lot of things that have come up now in our discussion. One thing is a clear company strategy that's in line with the market and what you're out there to do. Top management getting involved in the projects, ownership of projects, clear ownership, and of course, as they were saying, good basis for somebody's trying to get in my office. A good basis for project management. We've got the right people. Project management skills are encouraged.
Jose?
Well, I have to sell a bit of OPM3 here. OPM3, for me, it's a way to go forward, because with OPM3 you have a proper knowledge-based to see how the organization is acting. When we are talking about knowledge in OPM3, you are talking about the PMBOK, you are talking about the portfolio standard, the program standard that PMI developed, and OPM3 is going after those processes that are established in those, that are not established, they are stated in those documents, and it goes after them and tries to see if the organization has the capabilities that it should have to fulfill all the standard requirements. And so for me, OPM3 is a way to improve the organizations and the way that the organizations do their projects, because of our basics in the knowledge, in the improvement, and the observation of the actual state of the organization. When we are talking about OPM3, we are talking about observing the skills that are really happening inside the organization and mapping those skills with steps to go further and improve. And let me explain a bit that in OPM3 you are not trying to get 100% mature. That's an impossible achievement, and because there are incompatible things between themselves. You want to go after the strategic plan, and you want to have sure that to make sure that the steps that you are going to take are aligned with what the organization wants to achieve in the future. So for me, this is really the way to go further. Yes, I'll go with OPM3.
Who's next? Dale, have you had a crack at this one?
Sorry, I was on mute. It's like, how about you go?
I think I am. Okay. I think Jose just made a very, very key observation, and that is making sure that the steps that you're going to take are in alignment with what the organization wants to do. When you are evaluating or trying to improve your organization's approach to organizational project management, I think it's really important to be really attentive to your environment and your culture within the organization, and kind of gauge, what if we're to take these steps. What kind of executive support are we going to have in making those changes? Because you could come up with the best, new processes and new theories and to implement in your organization, but if you don't have some executive support, it's not going to go anywhere. So I think the first thing to do is to find out, how the executives would like to improve the organizational project management, and if you need to sell them on, some kind of an improvement, you can do that on a case-by-case basis, but make sure that whatever steps you want to recommend to improve organizational project management are really desired by your executive team. And if you can do that, if you can kind of check that box going in, that's going to make everything else downstream from there a lot easier.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Jonathan, do you want to add anything before we wrap up?
No, it's
sorry, John.
Is it John? Yeah, John.
I'm just wondering where I get my poppies for the opium that Jose was talking about. No, it's OPM, isn't it? OPM, yeah. No, that's it from me.
OPM.
All right. Well, I really appreciate everyone. Thank you very much for being able to join us at PMTV. Before we go and wrap up, please let us know, or let the audience know, how can they reach you if they have any questions. So let's start off with Jose. If someone wanted to reach you, what's the best way to reach you?
Well, I think you guys can see my down. There is a company there. It's www.ambitus.com, and my email is jose.pinto@ambitus.com.
Excellent. How about you, Jonathan?
I think the best way would be to go via LinkedIn, Jonathan McCoig. Just find me there.
Excellent. And you, Dale?
Oh, I just put my email address up here in the title here. So drichards@rosettastone.com. That's the best and surest way to get a hold of me.
All right. Thank you very much, Jonathan. Sorry, John. Sweet Jonathan.
You can find me at publicsectorpm.com or pmtv.pro.
Do you want to close us off then, John?
Yeah. Thanks ever so much, everybody. It's been a really interesting talk again. We're really grateful for your time. I'm John Hyde from publicsectorpm.com.
And I'm Bernardo Tirado from the Project Box. Thank you for joining. Until next time, take care, everyone.
Bye.
Well, bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.